Hi there. Welcome to this edition of the Big 12 Podcast. I am your commissioner, Stormstopper, and I'm here with Danger Zone. We're going to go ahead and take a look at how the Big 12's been shaping up in the early season. We're going to take a look at how the quarterbacks are doing, how the teams are doing. With recruitment in a little bit over a week, we're going to look at some of the team's recruiting needs and just get a sense of where the conference is going to be going from here on out.
All right. Let's start with some quarterback rankings. Right now, I have for the top quarterback in the conference is Brad Davis at Texas. He is the JUCO who came in redshirted for a year, but he has been everything he's marked up to be. He's playing on arguably the best team in the conference, but he is performing just as well as he should on that team.
Exactly. Like I have him up at number one as well. He's accurate, completing 67% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's throwing the most of anybody in the conference and not really suffering for it either. Just couldn't ask for any more from him.
His game against Florida was particularly impressive. 24 of 37 for 289, 2 touchdowns and an interception. He did throw that interception early on in the game, but he bounced back. After the fourth quarter, he was on fire, and he led Texas to a big win. And that is an impressive defense that Florida has. So it was an impressive win for Brad Davis. I think that's the biggest win anyone's had in this conference so far, and he
absolutely
at the highest level in that game. So I think I'm not sure you can put anyone else, even if he is playing on a team who has wide receivers like Harry Whiteside, you can't put anyone else above him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's only really 2 quarterbacks who have any claim to being in the same tier as him, and for different reasons. I'd say those 2 are Graham Burnett and Nathan Burden. Burnett
right.
because he's putting up excellent stats as well, even higher completion percentage than Davis, with a very, very raw receiver set of receivers.
Mm-hmm.
The one black mark on his record is that Alabama game where he threw 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions. Obviously that was still a win, but
and it was against Alabama, but Alabama's 0-3 right now. They're starting allowing the best of completion or best quarterback stats, but they are 0-3 and struggling a bit.
Yep. So that's
the win does not look as good as it did when they
yeah.
put it off. So those are my next 2 in the column of Graham Burnett right now. Though, so you can talk about Burden a little bit. I think you were about to.
Yeah, Burden. He's been impressive. We've had this discussion on strength of schedule. We don't need to have it again. But he's putting up easily the best stats of anybody in the conference, completing more than 3/4 of his passes, 11 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, and to me the most important stat: no interceptions. After throwing 15 last year.
15.
Yeah, that it'll be really hard for him to do the same this year.
Yeah, I have him at number 2, right above Burnett, and that's partly because he hasn't played the toughest schedule. He's probably played the weakest schedule in the conference, but at any rate, he's still putting up the best numbers, and he's doing what he should be doing against that schedule. He is a bit of a wild card. We'll see what happens when he gets to tougher opponents, but right now I do have him second best, barely ahead of Burnett, but Burnett has some issues especially. But after that Alabama game, you do look at Burnett hasn't thrown another interception, so that is a plus for him.
Yep, and he seems to have been just getting better each game, going from 19 of 32 to 25 or 20 of 25, and then 20 of 26. Oklahoma doesn't win these games without him. Sean Egloff, he hasn't been bad by any means. I was hoping for a little bit more from him, um, but I mean, 5.2 yards per carry is still nothing to sneeze at.
Not at all. And something else you should note that Graham Burnett on the season actually has a higher quarterback rating than Brad Davis. He has the second best in the conference, of course, behind Nathan Burden. Granted, he is 40 points behind Nathan Burden, but you can take schedule into that pretty significantly.
Yep.
So I think Brad Davis is the top tier, and then Burden and Graham Burnett after that. But the guy I have next, you might disagree with. I'm not sure. It's actually Marcus Schwartz of Baylor, who is. It's going to be unexpected to see him up there, but especially considering what Jason Vick did last year, he is playing incredibly. He has completing 67% of his passes, has a solid 8.79 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns to 1 interception, a great quarterback rating of 155, and on top of that, he is a scrambling quarterback. He hasn't been as great on the ground, but he's done a lot of that without Sean Bell, which means even more.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, even his performance on the ground, like, I mean, it hasn't been bad by any means. Like, I mean, if I'm Baylor, I'd take 4.75 yards per carry from my quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like I definitely don't have Schwartz as high as you do, but I don't have him that much lower. I think I have him at number 6. But I mean, again, that's a lot higher than anybody would have expected coming into the year for him. So
Baylor quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've said, like, I don't know if I've used the phrase best quarterback Baylor's had since Joshua Andrews, and granted, not too much competition there, but he's the best quarterback they've had since Joshua Andrews.
Isn't that only Jason Vick, though? I think...
Like, I can phrase things however I want to sound as misleading as I want. That's my right.
All right, I do agree, though, he is better than Jason Vick. And that is
absolutely.
I honestly think Baylor can be a scary team when they get Sean Bell back, if he plays as well as he did those 5 carries against Michigan State.
Yeah, definitely.
Great yards per carry and a touchdown against them. So.
Yep, which is more touchdowns than he had last year.
And that is significant. So who do you have at your 4th spot?
I have Richmond King, and putting Richmond King there, I'm definitely taking his most recent game into account, or like more into account than the others. Like, I don't know, I've always felt like I've wanted him to do more than he's been doing, and the game against Colorado State, 25 of 40, 338 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's exactly what I've been looking for from him for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a change in scheme. I don't know if like it's just Colorado State, but I mean I think that's the best game unadjusted for competition that any Big 12 quarterbacks had like all year in terms of pure production.
Mm-hmm. I definitely have him lower than that, but I see if you take that into account. He has the 3rd most attempts in the conference right now behind Brad Davis and Eric Jennings, I believe.
Yep.
Like I said, I have him a few spots lower, but I can see where you're putting him up there. He does have a high quarterback rating. I just not sure how... Well, that's actually a good point. I haven't... take into account that last game as much. But he was impressive. Who are his first couple games against? I didn't see.
His first 2 games were against Pittsburgh and Virginia.
And he did lead them to wins against both. I understand.
Yep. And granted, it's never been like West Virginia's not really had like a quarterback just dominate for them since Gary Baldacci. But and King's never really done that either. Like, this is really the one time that I've seen him play this way. So I could understand like hesitating to rank him very highly just because, like, I mean, what if that turns out to be an anomaly?
Hmm. And that's definitely something to take into account
Hmm.
because you look, even someone like, because you go back to Nathan Burden is, I think, the only other Big 12 quarterback to face Colorado State. You can correct me if someone else has played him. But Nathan Burden's stats against Colorado State were similar. And that does say something because of how high we both have Burden ranked, second or third. But he went 15 of 19 for 248 and 2 touchdowns. So those 4 touchdowns were impressive. And it was a big win for West Virginia, even against a winless, I believe, Colorado State team. But I think we need to see a couple more weeks of that before he moves up to fourth. But West Virginia is a team that could be scary this year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
Who do you have after that?
Let's see, we're at number 5 now.
Number 5.
Number 5 would be my guy, Eric Jennings.
I actually
And
have him at that spot too.
this is lower than I'd hoped he'd be, but, I mean, he's not been as accurate as I would have liked. He's thrown a couple interceptions, not the highest passer rating, but on the other hand, I'm having him throw the ball a lot. I anticipate continuing to do so. He's been putting up some big numbers. I think the quarterbacks that I have below him, I think one, maybe two of them could do the same, those kinds of attempts, and the one that I definitely think could do the same isn't doing the same with a similar number of attempts, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Eric Jennings has certainly been impressive. I think the thing is he's been impressive against good defenses, which is what's gotten me most about Eric Jennings. Even though his numbers aren't that high, 62%, only 4 touchdowns on 98 attempts is not great at all. But he's been producing like his team needs to. See, he has, as far as pure passing yards go, I think he's 4th in the conference. 3rd. There's Brad Davis and Christian Barkley are actually ahead of him. I
thought Barkley had 784 and Jennings had 797.
So he's second. I was just looking at that wrong. He's second behind Brad Davis, but on fewer attempts, and he does have the second most attempts in the conference. So he has been impressive. I think we have him at the same spot. He hasn't produced as much as he could have, but he's also been playing great defenses, so it's understandable. So he sits in that middle range. If he can put up some impressive stats in the next 2 weeks against 2 pretty good teams.
You're starting to lag a lot. I kind of missed that a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That last part.
I apologize. The internet's messed up. But his next 2 games are going to be against Arizona and TCU, 2 very good defenses. If he can put up impressive numbers and lead his team to wins against those 2 teams, he's got to be in conversation for top 3. So he can definitely move up pretty soon here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be shocked if he put up great numbers against Arizona, just because, like, I mean, that defense is just so good. Like, it's the best cornerback tandem that I've faced all year. I'm not necessarily looking forward to that Arizona game. But
yeah, we'll have to see. And the TCU defense that's allowed 17 points on the season. But either way,
okay, we'll match that and then some.
All right. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, Eric Jennings is there. I think our next spots are actually where we had 4 and 6 flipped, because at 6 I have Richmond King, who we've discussed.
And I have Marcus Swartz, who we've discussed.
So we can kind of skip past that, and I explain my reasoning for King being a little lower. After that, we get into the bottom 4, and there are a couple quarterbacks down here who are highly rated and should be performing better. At 7, I have Wayne Schmidt.
Same here.
And part of the reason he's down there, I think, is not his fault. I think he has a bad O-line that's not helping him out at all. But he's got to be doing more for his team. You look at games against, like, Tulane, where Oklahoma State lost. He was pretty efficient. He was 15 of 20 for 190 and a touchdown. But he's got to be doing a lot better than that for his team. He can't let his team lose those games, and it's not necessarily fair to put it all on him, but he's got to take some of that. And Oklahoma State's not performing, and part of that is because Wayne Schmidt isn't taking enough on himself.
Yeah, and I'd hesitate to say anything about Wayne Schmidt in that game just because, I mean, like, they did score 35 points. Although, on the other hand, though, 2 of those touchdowns did not come from the offense. I think a pick 6 probably from Kerry Miller because he's awesome.
And Raheem Robinson took one back for a touchdown.
Yep. So what gets me about Wayne Schmidt, though, is the fact that he is averaging by far he's getting the least out of every pass he throws. Like, I have him at 6.7 yards per attempt, which is well below 9th place, and 10.61 yards per completion. So, like, I mean, when he throws the ball, he's not getting first downs out of that, and like, that means one incompletion is going to kill the drive.
And yards per completion usually isn't always a great stat to measure quarterbacks by. It's a stat to measure receivers by and how many yards they're getting, how explosive their offense is when they do complete passes.
Mm-hmm.
But Wayne Schmidt is throwing to Raheem Robinson.
Exactly.
And I think we all know Raheem Robinson's pretty explosive, plenty explosive. And he shouldn't be getting 10.61 yards per completion with Raheem Robinson on his team.
Which tells me either he's not looking deep enough or he doesn't have time to look deep enough, which goes back to that offensive line, or even that, or it could be that his receivers struggle to get open. I don't know, like maybe losing Tommy Boyman was just a lot bigger of a loss than we thought.
Mm-hmm. But either way, he's underperforming. Definitely underperforming what he did last year. I think a few people expected him to drop off, but be with the loss of a lot of their offensive linemen, especially Ryan Robinson. But I think he's fallen a lot more than people could have expected.
Yep, and as a result, I think I think there's just 2 quarterbacks who have fewer yards. Like, fewer total passing yards than he does at this point. Actually, I guess that's not entirely fair since Swartz has played an extra game. But granted, Swartz also
has 20 fewer attempts.
Yeah.
So when you say there's 2 players who have fewer passing yards, you can also look at the fact that there's only 2 players who have more attempts.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's part of the reason that his efficiency is down, but he's still, and the reason I only have him at 6 and not even lower is because he is throwing 5-1 TDs to interceptions, which is one of the better in the conference. It's actually 4th in the conference behind Burden, who's 7-0, Richmond King, Brad Davis, and then Wayne Schmidt. And again, he's also struggling because his offensive line may not be protecting him enough.
Yep. I feel like I think Oklahoma State's offensive line ratings haven't been as bad as we thought they were going to be. Actually, they're averaging the 4th best rate in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's entirely it, or if there's just something we're not seeing there.
Yep. All right, so after Wayne Schmidt, I have another quarterback who is underperforming his rating, and he has a few fewer excuses. Maybe his competition's been tough, but I have Christian Barkley next.
Absolutely. Leading the conference in interceptions with 5, only 3 touchdown passes.
He's one of 2 players to have more interceptions than touchdowns.
Yep. And the other one's ranked lower than him in both of our lists.
Mhm.
So, and what really gets me is like he started off so well. Like that first game, 25 of 33, 341 yards and two touchdown passes, and then since then, like I mean, it's just a total Christian Barkley move to just not show up the next two games.
And
And
part of it may have been the coaching change.
and part of it may have been playing a couple of SEC defenses, LSU especially, and Mississippi State.
Mhm. And there's a few things that go into it. And to be fair to him, his yards per attempt is okay, 9.12. He has a slightly below average completion percentage at around 64, but that interception rate is just awful.
Yep.
How many did he throw against LSU though? That might.
He threw 3 against LSU and 2 against Mississippi State.
Okay.
And 2 of his 3 touchdown passes this season came against Iowa State. And if we were to rank the defenses, I think I have Iowa State at 10th.
Yeah. So I think even with that first game, a lot of what Christian Barkley has done has been because he hasn't performed well at all. Even though he had looked great against Iowa State, that could be a big part just because Iowa State wasn't that good and isn't that good. And when he played a defense can you hear me lagging?
I can hear you now.
All right. When he played a defense that I consider about average, which is the Mississippi State defense, he threw 2 interceptions. And when he played the LSU defense, which I'd consider great, he threw 3 interceptions.
Yep. He did the same kind of thing last year, had brilliant games against teams like Kansas, and then laid eggs elsewhere.
So I think he's definitely in the bottom of the barrel quarterbacks, which is surprising for a 5-5 quarterback. It certainly is. So I think our next... What's up?
I said I'd seen this once before in the Big 12, and that was Joshua Andrews post-injury.
And even though that was only 2 or 3 games, wasn't it? It was week 10 that he was injured.
Yes.
Week 11 he played pretty well, so it was only a couple games.
Yeah. One that I particularly enjoyed, but let's go ahead and get to the next quarterback.
Okay, the next 2 I think we have the same as your next 2. I have Marshall Newman in the 9 spot.
Yeah, I have him there as well. I mean, and he should be expected to be down here just because, he just isn't very good. But I hate to use the cliche, he probably works the hardest of anybody in the conference to improve himself, stick to the game plan. Like he does probably about what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, and that's saying something because he's playing for arguably the least talented team in the conference. And last year he led them to a bowl game, which is definitely impressive. And
I don't like to think about that.
But that is something. But even so, even though he's playing arguably the least talented quarterback on the least talented team, we still have to put him there at 9, and it's better than 10th.
Yep.
But he's only completing 59% of his passes. He does have a pretty impressive yards per attempt, and
because the passes he throws, he's finding receivers in space that are getting yards after the catch.
Oh, it definitely looks like that when he has the highest yards per completion in the conference by a good margin.
Yep. That just shocked me to see that. Like the way Kansas State maximizes every single play is just. If I could replicate that, no one would beat me.
It's a team that fights for every yard they get, which is, I think,
it's a great quality to have.
It's an example of coaching.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and after that, he has 5 to 3 touchdowns to interceptions, which isn't great, but my number 3 quarterback has 4 to 3, so you can't. harp on that too much. Three interceptions isn't very good, but 5 touchdowns is third in the conference. Well, it's tied for fourth actually, but that's still very impressive. Other than that, he's definitely performing well. He actually, for touchdowns per game, he is fourth. Okay, he's played the same number of games. I was just making sure. And after that, you have Clifford Wilcox, who might be the most disappointing quarterback this year.
Yep. So, yeah, just there's not really any particular stat he's doing well in. Like he's got the second lowest completion percentage, not a great yards per attempt, only one touchdown pass all year.
2 interceptions isn't awful, but when you pair it with one touchdown pass and only 76 attempts, it's pretty bad. Or 54 attempts. 54 attempts.
Now, where he does succeed is on the ground. 16 carries for 99 yards so far. So, actually, the second highest yards per carry of anybody in the conference. But I mean, that's 16 carries all year through 3 games. So, like,
he's helping his team out by carrying him on the ground.
Yeah. So Iowa State's bread and butter is their run game, but like, I mean, it's their most efficient runner isn't getting enough carries.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why you got to sit him at last.
Yep.
But like I said, that is disappointing because he was a lot better than that his freshman year last year.
I'm not so sure about that.
Really, it really wasn't.
Like,
I remember.
I mean, he was awful last year. Like, he barely completed half his passes. He had 6 touchdowns to 12 interceptions.
Okay, I must be thinking of earlier on in the year that when he started strong, but either way, it's not very good for Clifford Wilcox.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I still think he's still probably got another year of development left before we can truly see how good of a quarterback he's going to become. But now he's a sophomore. He's going to be a junior next year. Like, he's going to have to start putting the pieces together at some point.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. But Iowa State might be looking for a new quarterback if he can't. All right.
Yeah, maybe Julius Minnow for a Minnesotan.
All right, so if we move on a little bit, we talked about the quarterbacks. Let's talk about the teams themselves and move on to some power rankings. And I'm not sure we even have to talk about the number 1 team because I'm sure me and you both have the same team, number 1.
Yep, Iowa State.
No, I have Texas number 1, and
exactly.
Well, I don't think you can put anyone but Texas at number 1 at this point. They have the biggest win in the conference. They started out as the most talented team in the conference, and they haven't shown any signs of letting up.
Yep, exactly. Like, there's no real contest about it. Like, after week 1, you could have power ranked Oklahoma at number 1, and in fact, probably Oklahoma should have been power ranked number 1 just because of the Alabama win. But now, I mean, first of all, Florida was always a better win than Alabama was going to be, and second of all, Alabama's not looking like any kind of a good win anymore.
And Oklahoma, after that, hasn't necessarily lived up to that Alabama win, struggling against Colorado and whatnot. Otherwise, though, they've been impressive, and they're my number 2 team. I think you probably have the same because
yep,
they came in, they had a few questions about them that were surrounding the team, especially about how they would perform at the wide receiver position, and give their freshman quarterback targets to hit. But Graham Burnett's been playing great. He's had receivers. His receivers have performed, and they've won games.
Yep, exactly. Just no real complaints about how Oklahoma's played. Even if they struggled against Colorado, they got the job done, and their national championship team struggled again.
Oh, I think
This team that lost to Kansas State, I mean, like basically, I think it just matters that they got the job done, and if they beat West Virginia tomorrow night, then I mean they'll be in great position going forward.
Yeah, I think they have. If they beat West Virginia, they'll have control of the North. It'll end up coming down to them playing Kansas well and having to beat Kansas, who's been a thorn
Which
in
they
their
won't.
side. But they'll definitely give them a leg up in the North. Now, after Oklahoma, I actually have another Big 12 North team, and that's Kansas right now. I think their wins against Wisconsin and uh, BYU give them a solid strength of schedule, at least a couple quality wins, and that pushes them up to third in the conference. We'll see in these next 2 weeks if they're going to stay there, and if they do win, if they do win the next 2 weeks, I'm probably going to move them up to second, just because of how impressive that would be. But
I mean,
right now I do
I'd be
have them
shocked if that happened.
but right now I do have Kansas at third, and going forward as one of the better teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I actually have TCU at third. I think. I mean, here I'm kind of going along more with where I'm voting in the coaches poll, and I have TCU a lot higher than I have Kansas or West Virginia. So, and granted, obviously, like I think my wins are of higher quality, but like TCU kind of gets some of the benefit of the doubt from last year's performance, bringing almost everybody back. So like even though I don't really know how well it's going to carry over because of the schedule that you've played so far this year, like I think I think TCU is probably the third best team in the conference right now. So
yeah, and I feel similarly. I just think Kansas has shown more this year. I mean, TCU, at least my team, hasn't struggled against anyone. Georgia State was dicey, but it was still a 10-point win, and it was never really that close. And the other two games were just blowouts, and we haven't seen much from TCU to see if we are that same team that we were last year. And the more I look at our team last year, it was a good team, certainly, but there was a lot of sort of luck involved. I don't want to say luck, but we had forced a lot of interceptions and, of course, threw a lot of interceptions. So we had a quarterback putting ourselves in bad spots at sometimes, but the defense was making big plays to bail them out, even if the defense wasn't making other plays at other position or at other times and gave up a lot of points sometimes. So I think a lot of that was defensive touchdowns that helped win games. I know 2 games, the Texas Tech and Texas A&M game, were won because of a defensive touchdown, and that's sometimes unsustainable into the next season. So that's why I have TCU a little lower, because I have to see that they can continue what they did last year and improve on that.
yeah, and probably the reason I have Kansas a little bit lower. I mean, it might just be that I know my team a little bit better than other people do. So like, I mean, there's a few spots where I'm really hoping for more than I'm getting. Area number 1 being Eric Jennings' completion percentage. So I mean, there's like, and just the fact that like it's so many freshmen and so many sophomores. So like, I mean, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking like, I'm not sure that that we're at a sustainable point yet, if that makes any sense.
That's definitely how I felt with my team last year, so I understand that. So after those 4, the next team I have is West Virginia. I don't think
Yep.
you can argue another team, because I think there's a clear cutoff from the top 5 teams to the bottom 5 teams.
Absolutely.
And West Virginia is definitely making that top 5. They're 3-0 right now, I believe, with wins over Virginia and Colorado State, and
And Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. That's another good team that they have a win over.
Yep. Pittsburgh on the road too. granted, Pitt isn't off to the best start at all this year, but I mean, I think it's still a really good team even without James Dale.
And I agree, and they've been a good team, at least a solid win. Maybe not beating a top 10 team, but they have always been a solid win and a good team to beat. And I think West Virginia has shown a lot this year. They've been what people thought they could be as a dark horse in the North to challenge the other two teams who have won it every year.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think they're a step behind them right now at number 5, and we're gonna have to see if they can keep it up. But they certainly have one of the most impressive starts to the season.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I'm not really sure like what I'm using to separate West Virginia from TCU and Kansas. Like I don't know. I guess like I'm not used to seeing them like contend for the division yet. So I kind of hold a little bit of like I don't know if it's actually fair to them to hold a little bit of doubt, but like I just kind of want to know if this is something that they can sustain as well.
But if they can, I think they're going to be one of the scarier teams in the conference.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch anything you just said.
Okay. I said, but if they can, I think they're going to be one of the scarier teams in the conference.
Yeah.
If they continue to play like they have. And I'm not sure how much this matters, but 2 of their first 3 wins were against rival teams. Against Pittsburgh and Virginia.
I didn't actually realize Virginia counted as one of their rivals, but
yeah, you don't think so?
I mean, I honestly don't know. Like,
I know Pittsburgh's the big backyard brawl.
Oh yeah.
I always thought Virginia was one of their rivals. They might not be. We cast a West Virginia fan.
Good news about West Virginia, though, is that we just don't have to wait to really get a sense of what they're all about, because I mean they've got their biggest game of the season upcoming tomorrow. So if they beat Oklahoma, like I mean, do it well enough, and I might move them all the way up to number 2 in one fell swoop.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely not a stretch at all. All right, I think we might have a disagreement. Who do you have after West Virginia?
Oklahoma State.
See, I have Baylor in this spot, but a Baylor team contingent on Sean Bell coming back.
Yeah.
But I think, at least on my perspective, I think Baylor is a solid team across the board. I think Tabor's done a great job of recruiting. As far as coaching goes, we'll see how he can compete. But I think when they don't have Jason Vick starting at running back, or not starting at playing running back by any means, if you get Sean Bell back, I think Baylor can be a threat. And I think they're the 6th best team in the conference right now.
Yeah, I have them like a lot lower, like in the number 9 range. And I don't know. I want to see Sean Bell back before I move them up. Is all. Like, I think.
I may be looking a couple weeks ahead, to be honest. But they don't have any big games until then, so.
Baylor's done with like they're through the through Sean Bell's injury now, but their next game is against Texas.
True. That's what I meant. I think I've been looking at their schedule and saw they didn't have many huge games until Sean Bell got back.
Yeah, and that's not to understate the job they did getting through the Donovan Marshall period. Like, I mean, Marshall, he couldn't crack the 3.5 yards per carry mark, scored just 2 touchdowns in 3 games, but, I mean, they got just what they needed from him and nothing more.
Yeah, and
a lot of the credit has to go to Wilbur Shearer, who had a blocked field goal in overtime against Bowling Green, and then a pick 6 against San Jose State.
Mm-hmm. And I don't see Baylor winning their next 2 games by any means. They play Texas and Notre Dame.
Yep.
And
then they have to play at Oklahoma State, and then West Virginia, then at Texas Tech. Like, I
I
think
think they
these
can.
next 5 are going to be a really tough stretch.
I do. I agree. I think they could probably get out of here 2-3. I really think they can go through that stretch 2-3, which sets them up to make a bowl game if they can beat Kansas State or Iowa State. But I have them definitely above Oklahoma State because I think Oklahoma State's been underperforming this year. They haven't been impressive to me, but they are my next. Actually, no, don't even have them next. But they lost to Tulane and then beat Akron and Northern Illinois. So I want to see them do something. Show me anything impressive for Oklahoma State, and maybe I'm not giving them enough benefit of the doubt from last year, but that loss to Tulane just looks really ugly.
Yeah, and I have Oklahoma State at number 6. I'm But this is the part where I'm really just looking for something good out of anybody rather than because with Baylor, I'm like Baylor. My hesitations with Baylor are mostly on the defensive end, where they just haven't been good, and haven't been good in a while. But their run defense has been shoring up. They've been giving up under 4.8 yards per carry this year. They still the San Jose State game was the only time that they've really stopped the pass in any meaningful way. Whereas Oklahoma State, they can't stop the run at all. They
They've never
like
been able.
5.4 yards per carry. It's just been bad. It's been and this has been the case since the middle of last season. But their pass defense has been excellent.
That is true. I think it might be just they focus on the pass and have Kerry Miller.
Yeah, and Kerry Miller's, as I said earlier, he's awesome.
He's one of the best corners in the conference.
Yeah.
Probably the second best behind Ivory Hole.
I can agree with that. Basically it just comes down to Oklahoma State. I see this one thing that they do really well, and I suppose you could make an argument for Texas Tech along the same lines. Like their pass deep, or actually no, I was looking at Texas. Never mind. Texas Tech's pass defense is awful.
Texas everything's defense is great. So.
Yeah, their run defense could stand to improve, but they've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown, even if their yards per carry, their yards per carry is, I think, 5th in the conference, or yards per carry allowed. I know, but we're getting ahead of ourselves now.
All right. And the team, I'm not even sure where we are, because right now, I just talked about 7 spot. I have Texas Tech, then I have Oklahoma State at 8. So we have Baylor and Oklahoma State switched on ours. But, yeah, I have...
You said you have Oklahoma State at 8 or 9?
At 8, actually.
Because I have Baylor 9, and I have Kansas State at number 8.
I have Kansas State at 9. So when we're going down, I think the only thing we can agree on down these rankings is Iowa State at 10. But go talk about... Even the reason I have Texas Tech over Oklahoma State is the fact that Texas Tech, even though they're 1 and 2, they were impressive against Iowa State. And that being impressive against a bad team is something that Oklahoma State was only able to do against Akron, and I would take Iowa State over Akron any day. And even against Northern Illinois, and I'd probably still take Iowa State over Northern Illinois. I'd
take Northern Illinois over Iowa State. Northern Illinois is actually
they are a talented team.
They're easily the best MAC team.
Oh yeah, certainly.
I don't think barely beating. I think Oklahoma State's result against Northern Illinois was actually a pretty good result.
That was Oklahoma State beating them by 3.
Yeah, by 3, but it was a 10-point game for most of the fourth quarter. Northern Illinois scored a touchdown and just never had time to catch up. They weren't in danger of losing that game.
True. And I do want to say that Iowa State played Kansas to a 10-point game and
Yep.
Texas Tech to an 11-point game.
Yep.
That is something to be noted for Iowa State.
They've,
But that still puts them, in my opinion, and I think yours as well, at 11th in the or 10th in the conference. Kansas State, I think right now they're getting the nod over Iowa State for me because of coaching. Because I think Iowa State is more talented easily than Kansas State, but I think Nemez Zero can outcoach Minnesota, and I think that puts Kansas State ahead. I think Kansas State's going to perform better.
he can outcoach anybody in the conference, I think. But
Certainly.
Yeah, he just it's just so interesting to see that tension of great coaching and terrible talent. So
Bill Snyder.
Yep. Except Bill Snyder has reasonable talents. I mean, Kansas State's got our Kansas State has they've got a couple JUCO fullback or one JUCO fullback and one 5-star fullback and what else?
Not very much. It is a struggle to be coach at Kansas State. But
I mean, they're going to beat me again this year because that's just the way the world works. I beat Oklahoma, Kansas State beats me, death and taxes. But yeah, that's basically why I have Kansas State 8th instead of 9th. They're just winning games at this point. Houston, they could have won, didn't quite. Oregon State, they got the job done. Illinois got the job done. I think they play Washington State tonight. But those games, that puts them at 3-1. Then they just have to figure out where to steal a couple games. I mean, they've got Cincinnati on their schedule. They've got Iowa State on their schedule, both at home. A repeat bowl appearance could be in the cards for them, especially if they beat me again.
We'll have to see about that. But I think there are a couple blocks in the way before they can make it to a bowl again. But it would be an incredibly impressive coaching job if they did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but with all those holes on Kansas State's team, I think that brings us into our final segment of the day. Talk about recruiting a little bit. You're interested.
Recruiting.
All right. And talk about some teams and their biggest need, and maybe find a recruit or two who can fill that. Right now, I'm going to start with who we have number 1 in the conference, Texas. And if you look at their depth chart, they're going to lose a lot of seniors after this year. I think the biggest loss might be they lose 3 of their starting offensive linemen. But what could be scarier for them is the fact that right now they have 2 5-5 corners. Ivory Hull is a senior, and I could see Troy Marshall declaring. If Troy Marshall declares, then they're going to have to get a cornerback. And Adam Young from Lone Grove, Texas, or Lone Grove, Oklahoma, I think would be the best fit for them at that corner spot. But that is if Troy Marshall declares, and we could see that happening. Texas could be gutted this year. Otherwise, there are several offensive tackles in Texas that they should probably reach for to fill in that offensive line, as well as a pretty good offensive guard.
Yeah. For Oklahoma, I anticipate a lot of the same needs. Mostly offensive line for them. I'm just looking at their depth chart. I'm kind of looking at their who they have graduating over the next 2 years. So since I didn't really see any ready to play star offensive linemen in the Texas or desert subregions.
There's a center.
Oh, okay.
In Texas, but that's it. There's a 2.5 center.
Which is great because that's the one position that on the offensive line that Oklahoma doesn't need. So
that's the same thing for Texas. They have a great 3.5 or 4.5 center, so that's not someone they're going to be reaching for, I don't think.
Yeah. So for Oklahoma, I mean, I guess it depends on what their priority is going to be. They should if I were them, I'd grab an offensive lineman like right now because like so that they can redshirt and be at least 2 out of 5 or 2.5 out of 4.5, and I use those numbers specifically because like the best offensive tackle is probably going to be Tyson Chadwick, and best offensive guard is going to be Walter Shannon, 1 out of 5 and 1.5 out of 4.5. So if they could choose to take a risk and wait till next year, see if like maybe a JUCO shows up, see if a 3 out of 5 shows up in Texas, but I don't know. I feel like they gotta grab that now.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma has a few needs that they're going to be addressing after this year, after a few tight recruiting classes.
Yep.
Number
next, one thing they really need is depth.
Yeah. Next, I'm going to look at Texas Tech, and if you look, they don't have too many needs that are going to be glaring. I think tight end is going to be their biggest need, but throughout the Texas sub-region, there isn't a tight end with greater than 4 potential. The second biggest need will probably be offensive guard, and that one I'm going to give them Walter Shannon, I think, is going to be their top target, who's a 1.5, 4.5 guard who can be someone to fill in immediately.
And it kind of lagged, so I missed which team you were talking about.
Texas Tech.
Okay. Yeah, Texas Tech's going to be interesting. Anyway, okay, so it just showed that you muted. So
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm just trying to get something. Someone came in, but I didn't want another dishes moment. All right, so that completely disconnected. Are you still there, Storm?
I'm still here. Okay.
That was okay. So I'm sorry about that, everyone. There's no one viewing. It's a recording, but whoever's just struggled through that. Go back a few seconds. Again, I'm still trying to talk about Texas Tech, and I still think their biggest need is tight end. And I don't think they have anyone to fill that in Texas. So instead of going after a tight end, I think they need to go after Walter Shannon. I'm sorry if you just heard that 3 times.
But hey, 3 times is better than none, so.
Exactly. All right. Who do we have next?
Let's see. I don't know if we're doing these in any particular order, so I was going to go with TCU next.
All right.
Just continue through the Texas sub-region. And so the first thing I noticed on your depth chart is that like all of your good wide receivers are juniors, and one of them, of course, is Jamel Beckham, 5 out of 5, could declare early, could choose to stay another year. Either way, wide receiver is going to be a pretty big need for you in the next couple of years. So I could see you going after someone like Lamont Wilder, target guy, 1 out of 5, could take a redshirt year and then be about where Jamel Beckham was his freshman year.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I had some similar thoughts to that. And if we're continuing through the Texas sub-region, look at Oklahoma State, and they're a team who actually has some massive gaping holes. And in reality, they're going to have to go for depth again to get a bunch of 1 of 3.5s to fill in those spots because they have some big holes coming up. But losing Kerry Miller, there's going to be a big loss at cornerback, and I think their next best is a 2.5. So I think if they go after Damani Jeffries in Oklahoma, who's a 2.5, 4.5 man guy, he could be the next Kerry Miller.
All right, and you said he was a 2.5 out of 3.5?
2.5 to
or
4.5.
oh, okay, yeah.
So
So
he's a guy who
play.
can come in and play immediately and have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, that sounds like a great bit for them. Um, okay, so next. Okay, so I guess I've already hit the two. I've hit Oklahoma and TCU. So let's see. I guess I'll head on east to West Virginia then.
Yeah, you
Um,
got some of those Big 12 North teams.
yep. So West Virginia is an interesting case. They had, I think they had AI recruiting last year, so that's going to leave them with a lot of holes to fill. And the number one need they're going to have is quarterback, just because if you need quarterback, that's already your number one need. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that in the Northeast subregion, Muhammad Foster is up there from Connecticut, 3 out of 5 scrambler. He'd obviously be an instant impact guy and a long-term impact guy. Bad news is, he's a scrambler, and they also need a running back. So I'm not sure how well that would work out for them if they couldn't get both.
Yeah, West Virginia has had bad recruiting a couple of years. A lot of times because they had a recruiting cycle where they got one recruit or something like that, and the recruits that people cut were eventually sent to West Virginia. That's how bad it got.
Yeah, and like if they've been able to keep themselves alive, especially for this year with JUCO, but the other shoe is about to drop.
And they're going to have a lot to go after. All right, one more in the Texas subregion over here. I'm going to look at Baylor. And Baylor actually has had very successful recruiting the past few years. They don't have very many holes at all, but their biggest is about to be at wide receiver. So that's who I have as Lamont Wilder, who I think they should go after. I think Lamont Wilder is going to be a hot commodity in Texas from Tecumseh, Oklahoma. He's got good size, and I think Baylor is going to be going after him. I think he's going to be a good fit there to, even as a 1 of 5, to potentially play immediately to fill in a tough need, maybe as a number 3 wide receiver.
Yeah, I could see that. So he's now been connected to what you said. So you said Baylor, right?
I did say Baylor.
Okay,
He's
yeah.
connected to every team in the Texas subregion, though, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. He's already been linked to TCU and Baylor today, so good luck. I don't know if you're going after him, but either way. I guess I'll go to Iowa State next. And they're like, I could be snarky and say the defense in general, they've got some good redshirts coming up. But outside of that, I think their biggest need is going to be inside linebacker. And they're in the Great Plains, so not necessarily the subregion with the most star power, but it does have Nicholas Quinn, a zone guy, and I think he could make an impact for them for years to come. Or if they want to cross the subregion boundary, there's Alexander Hutton over in the Midwest in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of Great Plains teams are going to cross the boundary. So,
all right, one other team I want to look at on my side is actually your team, is Kansas. And you look at Kansas, and you are all freshmen, sophomores on that team, and that's a team that's hardly losing anything after this year, and they'll hardly lose anything after next year. Because of that, and you look at their team, and overall, I think tight end's the weakest position, and without as much depth as Kansas has, they can take an immediate player to make an immediate impact. So Noah Hills in the Great Plains, a 3 of 5 tight end, could come in and dominate for Kansas and fill in that hole for probably 4 years.
Yep. Like, Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good match for me. So, like, um, yeah, um,
Sorry if
he's
I.
probably gonna be. I mean, he's probably gonna be the most hotly contested recruit in the Great Plains. And yeah, he's definitely on my board. So
All right.
I'm not afraid to admit that. So he could also be on Kansas State's board, and I say that in order to segue over to them. But for them, I mean, they just have a whole bunch of needs and a whole bunch of positions. Like we've said, least talented team in the conference, and this last recruiting class was okay, but not necessarily the rejuvenating class that they needed. So depth is their need, but if I were to pick a specific position, I'd go offensive guard. And although the depth there isn't great in the Great Plains, so Johnny Nance is probably the best one, and he's only a 1 out of 4. They could go with Derek Briggs in the Midwest, 1 out of 5, but again, not really a plug and play immediately kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
The other need I thought of for them was defensive end. So they could go for a guy like Mekhi Tolbert from South Dakota. I think there's a few options, but I didn't list them all in the Great Plains and Midwest.
All right. So I think that might bring this to a close. We've been talking for a while. I know there are a few recording errors, some connection errors. I apologize for that. But there is some good discussion here. I'm glad we got this chance to talk, Storm.
Yeah, this was fun.
All right, I'll give this up. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope the people watching enjoyed it, the people who sat through all of that lagginess. But if you're a Big 12 fan, you got some good information, maybe some recruiting tips on what you should be looking at.
Yep.
And we might do this again. I hope you guys give us feedback on the thread. I'm going to post this. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
Yep, and make sure to tune in tomorrow for some great games. Kansas, Arizona, and Oklahoma, West Virginia being the headliners. And Texas. Wait, what did you say?
I said also TCU Rice, right?
I think Texas Tech as well.
Yep, definitely some good games this week.
Yep.
In the Big 12 and the most exciting conference in the nation.
Yep, indeed. We'll see you there.
All right.